Good evening, everybody. It is so good to be back here in the Dojang. Just wait, it'll come soon. And I'm so happy to be able to have a conversation with Kwanjanam. Kwanjanam, it is a pleasure to see you again this week.
Good to see you too, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for bringing up the point that probably won't be much longer now when we'll be back together again.
Yep. And it'll feel so good coming back to the Dojang. Great. May I pour you some tea tonight?
Yes.
Great.
That was a particularly vigorous Pumse class. And frankly, I can use the elixir.
Great.
Thank you, sir. And allow me to do the same for you.
Thank you, sir.
There you go. Chupe.
Chupe.
Thank you, sir. Now I'm awake. Okay, and I'm going to fix this screen because you know me. Everything's got to be just right or else it's not right. Right?
That's...
Everything's got to be right or it's not right.
Either it is or it isn't.
Hi, Ginny. I see you there. Hope you can hear me.
Yep. Ginny actually has a question tonight.
All right.
I'm going to start off going back a little bit. I hope Arun is on. And he asked, what is the purpose of some grandmasters walking on glass during Taekwondo demonstrations? Is it to show mind over matter?
So Arun's question is, why do some grandmasters walk across broken glass during demonstrations? Is it mind over matter? Okay? And my reply to that is, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Quite frankly, I don't think there's any value in that, short of the histrionics of it or the dramatic aspect of it. I'm sure they would argue with me, those who do. Of course, there's yogis and other martial artists who I've seen walk across hot coals and things like this. And you know, it is a true example of mind over matter, I guess, you know, to some extent. Now, how do you actually prepare for that and not injure yourself, right? You would have to have the pads of a dog's foot, I think, in order to be able to do something like that. And I really don't see the great value in it. I mean, if you saw flames on the street and you needed to protect someone on the other side, chances are you wouldn't run through the flames. I mean, you would find an alternative trajectory, you know. So, Arun, it's a great question. I can't tell you that hasn't been asked by myself. But then you can also add to that, why do we break bricks, you know? And to me, that there's an answer to that that's a lot more practical, obviously. You know, showing that you have the penetrating force to do something like that, you know, is important. There's also a certain amount of gratification, self-gratification when you break. But over broken glass and hot coals, I'm kind of hard-pressed to see the practical purpose of it. Again, short of drama. You know.
Yeah. So you mentioned trials and rituals that I think were handed down from many, many centuries. And you talked about breaking. And,
right.
And I'm sure that there was some method of breaking in those days. Do we know what they did or not?
Do you mean a method of proving and penetrating power in other ways? I don't know how many of you follow. Look, if you're a crazy martial artist like Master Adams and I are, you probably, even in your spare time or surfing the web or whatever for information about something or other, right? And the more you surf the web, as you know, there's things like pointers that say, this guy likes martial arts, send him as much about it as possible. And you start getting all this extra additional information that you didn't really search for. I've seen videos of the Shaolin monks from Shaolin Temple, you know, and they had their own methods of proving strength. And one of them was to take the body and sit in a very deep horse stance and have one of their colleagues come up with a very sharp, not sharp, but very thick stick, or like a baseball bat, you know, and come up from below and strike them in the testicles as hard as they can, you know, and they would just sit there and go, like this, you know, or they would get struck in the midsection with an iron bar, you know, to show that their tunjun and their ki is so directive that it can actually protect themselves. And you've got to admit that they're actually doing it. It's not a dramatization. They're actually doing these things. So there are different methods of proving your steel, you know, or your worth. But breaking, for instance, like palm heels particularly, we talked about this, I think, last week or a couple of weeks ago, about starting out with a bucket of sand and striking with the palm heel and then moving up to small pebbles and then rocks.
Yep.
And certainly that was a method of training, and not only some of the Chinese styles, but in also to this day in many of the karate styles too. Especially the karate styles that focus on strength training, you know. There's a karate kata called sanchin, and sanchin is typically done, at least by men, without any tops on to accentuate the upper body muscles. And it's done very slow and very strength motions, you know. But some of these styles of karate are meant primarily to strengthen the body and then use it in such a way to self-defend yourself, you know.
Very, very poignant point on that.
Yeah, you know, the history of the martial arts is something that's very evanescent and also very subjective in the sense that you have to remember that writing down things didn't happen centuries ago. You know, there was unfortunately a lot of illiterate people. And when we talk about Asia, we talk about languages that were very hard to master. You know, the characters, the ideograms, or in pictograms rather, in Chinese were very hard. There's thousands of them, right?
Yes.
So really the Confucian scholars were the ones who were privy to that. And in Korea, up until 1443, it was almost impossible for the average citizen or the peasants to communicate by writing. Up until you know what happened then in 1443, King Sejong, who was one of the most illustrious kings in Korea, created Hangul. Right. And Hangul was the alphabet of the peoples. That's what it was meant to be, right? So it was relatively easy because it was phonetic in nature and it was easy to write. Right. So then you would be able to kind of canonize martial arts or anything that you were talking about. But a lot of what happened previous to modern times was kind of lost to history because it hadn't been written down. It was all oral tradition or physical tradition, right?
Right.
So some of the things that we may ask ourselves, like what was the history of breaking, what was the history of this form, that form, we're almost at the mercy of our masters today who claim to know the story or what little documentation exists and wasn't burned during wars, during occupations and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Going back to breaking, I have a personal preference, and I want to know whether you think that this is something that other people should try to do as well. When I do a break at a test, I always, yes, thankfully we get to set up, you know, what we want our breaks to be. But I always imagine I've got two people, and I need to take them both out, 1, 2, 3. Mm-hmm. So when I do my breaks, it's quick, quick. And I want to know what you think about that.
Oh, so you're referring to our black belt policy of doing 2 breaks?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I think it's a great idea. I think that's probably the right way to do it. That's the way you should do your pumse, right? Is seeing your adversaries in front of you.
Yes.
If you are a 4th dan master like Master Adams is, and if you've been involved in the martial arts as long as he has, and I've known him for a long time, and I know that he's very sincere about his practice, right? Very sincere about his martial art.
Yes.
So he sees that vision in his head. He's capable of seeing the vision in his head, not just during Pumse, but as he just told me right now, which I wasn't aware of, during his breaking technique, right? So clearly, to be able to see your adversary and to respond appropriately and with speed and power is really one of the unwritten tenets of Taekwondo, right? First strike must win, or swift kill. So if you have 2 strikes, you better get them done pretty quickly too, right?
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. I think it's a great idea. In fact, you should mention it to our students.
It's great. Thank you. I have actually, before I go to the next question, I have an assignment for everybody out there, and that is, I had no new questions this week. I have a bunch left over from last week. So I would ask every one of you to send at least one question this next week or tonight. That would be great. I am perfectly happy to sit here and just talk about the things that we all find interesting. But I really want this to be for you. I want you to have your questions answered. So please do yourself and all of us a good service and bring some questions.
You know, there's we adhere to the ancient symbol, a Taoist symbol of the Yang in Korean. It's yin yang in Chinese and in yo in Japanese, right? And that shows the dichotomy of nature, right? The 2 sides of a coin, so to speak. And clearly there are martial artists out there that are, and this is probably the great bulk of martial artists, that are just primarily concerned with the physical art, right? The schools they attend don't bow, they don't have meditation, they don't have any ornamentation like the Korean flag that we have, or certainly nothing like the shrine we have. They don't use Korean terminology, you know. So that's the type of martial arts that would not likely attend this class, right, or attend this session. But then there's the other side that not only, and I'm not saying one is wrong or right either, by the way, there's the other side that thirsts not just for the physical part of it, but almost in equal parts, or maybe even more so, the spiritual or the academic part of Taekwondo. And there certainly is a big chunk of that, you know. So my feelings are those are the folks who are on right now and choose to be involved in this type of class. You know, a network's news organization like CBS or NBC, ABC, was typically a loss loser, right? A cost loser. It never made money. It was their programming and their advertising that made money. The news section was just on there for a service, right? It was a loss leader. That's what they call it. This class may be the same. We may not have a lot of people in it. You know, it may not be the most attended class, but it's the smart class. You know, the class where we talk about the academics of things, where Master Adams always opens up by saying, "Let's go down deeper." You know, and so as we open up, as we reopen, and we need time to fulfill the physical part of the training, we may see that this class may go to every other week or something like that. I hope not, because I would much prefer that we offer at least one class a week where we can answer your questions, but Master Adams can't ask them if he doesn't have them, right? So by his requesting you to do this, I strongly urge you to help him, because he works very hard, and I'm sure that he looks forward to this class every week, and I'm sure he thinks about it ahead of time.
Yes, oh yes.
So I enjoy it immensely. You know me. I like to talk, and but I like to do it in a fashion where I'm actually giving you valuable information. And Master Adams prods me with that by asking good questions. So help him out. You know.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. We will certainly continue to discuss some great topics. And the next question is from Ginny. And we've talked an awful lot about what is Taekwondo today? You know, what are the political bodies? What is the politics of it? What is the ITF, WT, all USTA, all these things about Taekwondo. Ginny wants to know directly, though, if you could change something about Taekwondo, what would it be and why?
So, how's Congress doing these days? Right?
Oh, man.
Well, that's how Taekwondo is. You know, it's like Congress, right? And the more I get involved at higher echelons because of the USTA, the more I see it on a microscopic level, you know. It's a very, let me be frank with you, it's a very ego-driven art. All martial arts tend to be, but Taekwondo seems in particular to be very ego-driven. There are many different grandmasters out there who have certain views that are, and they're intransigent about changing them or taking a look around. The ones who kind of rise to the top are the ones who kind of direct the field, so to speak, right? And I'm talking about the people who run the WT, the people who run the KTA, people who run the Kukyuan and the Taekwondo Wan. They kind of set the stage, especially the president of the Kukyuan. You know, he has a lot of sway on what goes on. You know, the ideal answer, Ginny, would be if I could change something myself, it would be to try to bring all these disparate factions together. But I would be a hypocrite if I said that, because I'm fueling the fire by being one of the additives to that, being president of the USTA and knowing our traditional viewpoint and knowing how that traditional viewpoint is not viewed by others, you know. So to say I would like to bring people together is not really a truism for me, because I would like to, I guess the right answer to that would be, I would like to support our viewpoint and promote it to the point where other people understand at least why we have it. Not trying to you know, change their outlook, not trying to recruit them, but to at least make them understand the value of traditional Taekwondo as practiced in the, you know, mid-1940s to the late 1960s, and why we continue to feel it's important.
I have often, we've had discussions about the politics in Taekwondo.
So deep.
20 years, more than. And I almost feel sometimes, especially after being in Korea twice and doing so much work and so many seminars and whatnot, that the tradition of Taekwondo, that from its origins and to where it is now, is actually being held and secured by the USTA, which is kind of ironic that the traditions are not being held in Korea, the traditions are being held in the United States.
Yeah, there's been many masters, some that you know personally, who have said if you want to maintain and view the tradition of Taekwondo, then it's going to be done in the West. In other words, like, as you alluded to, America. You have to remember that Taekwondo is the national what of Korea?
Sport.
Yes, exactly. That was the key word right there. The national sport of Korea. In fact, if you look at the scroll that we have hanging up above the Chosun logo, that was a scroll that was written by Chung-hee Park, was the second president dictator of Korea.
Right.
For about 18 years. And that's a story unto itself, believe me, on Park Chung-hee. But he wrote that on the 20th, I think it was, yes, the 20th of March, 1971. And that was a proclamation, just like the king would write a proclamation. That was a proclamation officially making Taekwondo the national martial law sport of Korea. So if you are a Korean citizen, naturally you're going to follow your government, right? Especially if you're talking about gaining favor with the government. So
Yes.
most Koreans, and excuse me for generalizing here, but most Korean practitioners are driving, promote Taekwondo as a world sport, global sport, not just a national sport, but a global sport. And to do so, you have to follow what the leading organizations are doing right now, right? And that's, of course, a wealth of different things. Should I call it a wealth, or should I call it a detriment? I don't know. Because we have Taekwondo dance now.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that. Yeah.
We have demonstration Taekwondo, which is done just for the demonstration qualities of it. And then, of course, we do have self-defense oriented Taekwondo, but it seems to me, and in your estimation too, our visits to Korea, you just don't see a whole lot of it. Now, our students do, because we go to Grandmaster Lee's and we go to Grandmaster An's.
Correct.
And that's because I picked and chosen the different dojangs we go to. To learn that, yes. Because that's our slant on our training, right? Another thing that you have to kind of realize, and again I'm generalizing, is Asian philosophy in general, but particularly it seems in Korea, are not backward-looking people. They're looking towards the future.
Yeah.
And I saw this firsthand with Grandmaster Gyohan Lee. I asked him a question, and it was, why bother with what happened then? Think about what's happening now and in the future. It was related to the Kwans when I asked him. But so rather than look to tradition, certainly there are a lot of traditions that are held dearly in Asia. But there's a lot of looking forward, too, rather than looking backward. So, again, to answer your question, if you're going to maintain the tradition of our martial art, yes, the beacon points towards America, to be honest with you on this. And that's been noticed by many, many students and many teachers. I hope that it has. People have brought it up to me in the past, too.
Right. So, another good question was, what is the toughest obstacle you have had to face in your career?
The toughest obstacle I've had to face?
Yes.
Wow. That's a good question. Well, I guess first and foremost is the fact that I'm not athletic at all. I've never, ever been a sports person. When I was 8 years old, I was a Yankees fan, and I played baseball miserably. I think I put a football helmet on once and never, to this day, don't understand the game. I'm probably the only guy in Warwick who doesn't. But I'm just not an athletic person. So you know that Taekwondo is an action art, and you have to make physical motion. So in order to articulate those motions, it's always been a struggle for me, but a struggle built on love, because it's raised my physicality, so to speak, because of it. But if I had to identify the single biggest challenge, that would be it, I think, is the physical aspect of it. Of course, there's sub-challenges as far as being a business and a school owner and things like that, but the fact that I am not physical, or let me restate that, the fact that I'm not athletic has probably been my biggest challenge.
I find that an interesting answer, because I think people see you, because Taekwondo is so many different things. It's a sport. It's the art of that's carried through in the Pumse. It's the structure of the techniques. You may not be an athlete for the Yankees, but for Taekwondo, I don't know if I would agree with that. Because...
Thank you.
Yeah, seriously, because...
I guess, thank you.
You're not playing football, you're not playing baseball, you're not playing water hockey, polo, you're doing Taekwondo. And you've devoted your life to it, and you've written books, you've created videos, so much of your stuff is out for the world to see. I'm not so sure I buy you didn't find the right sport or place to be with football and baseball, because that wasn't your sport. It's like some people are great at baseball, but they can't hit a golf ball to save their life. So, but it was I appreciate you feeling it that way. So that's very good to know about.
I appreciate what you said too, because, hearing someone else lay out one's accomplishments kind of makes one pause for a second and say, it's a lot of stuff,
A lot of stuff.
It is. You're absolutely right. I've without a doubt, aside from my family, I've made it my life. And part of the reason that I made it my life is for my family, because there were holes and weaknesses in my character that Taekwondo not just improved, but filled enormously. And I think that could be said for anybody who studies it with sincerity and vigor, This is one of the reasons why during a situation like this, a crisis like this, when it would be so easy to lay it aside, we choose not to, because we realize that we need it as much as an alcoholic needs a therapy session,
Right.
You need this,
Right.
not just to maintain, but to improve.
Yeah, and I think that if I were to take a guess, I would be willing to guess that our students are standing taller, living with less stress than the average person because they are martial artists.
That I believe, absolutely. Yeah. When this first thing started, when first day this situation started, I was standing watching this huge wave tsunami coming at us in my mind, and I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? And not me personally, but how do I guide my students, because this is going to come and it's going to hit us full force. How do we deal with it? Because it's a reality now, And right away, those words blazoned in my mind, indomitable spirit and perseverance.
Yes.
And I realized that we were going to have to steel each other to really bolster each other to get through this. And so far, for the most part, and I keep reiterating the fact that the people who are truly true to their art and themselves are the ones I'm talking about. We've gotten this far, and they are standing tall, because they are what... you see this book, it says Ancient Wisdom for the Modern Warrior, right? This is the first book I wrote. And I didn't name it that. That was my publisher. My original title for that book was Warriors of a Different War. That was the name of it. But I guess my publisher, who's much smarter than I am when it comes to much smarter, said, look, we got to call it Taekwondo so people know what it's about, right? So they named it Taekwondo, and then they said Ancient Wisdom for the Modern Warrior. But people would say to me, what's this modern warrior stuff? I'm not a soldier. I have no intention of going on a battlefield and killing anybody. And so instantly I know they missed the point, We're warriors every day in the battle and the joy of life.
Right.
Life presents great joy, but it also presents great challenges. And again, we come back to the yang, right? One half would not be there without the other. How we deal with that in a graceful manner or in a mindful manner is going to dictate our sense of well-being, how we feel about the world and how we feel about ourselves. To me, personally, martial arts is the great elixir for this. It's the answer to almost everything. I'm sorry to be so adamant about it. I don't mean to paint it as a cult. It's not that at all. It's not a religion. At least it's not most people. It's mine, but it's not everybody's. It's not deified, but it is codified, so to speak. It's got its canon. And I truly believe that we as martial artists are modern-day warriors in the sense that we have the armor to protect ourselves against situations like this. And guess what? Unless something comes along that smacks us in the head even harder than this, I think that if we can get through this as martial artists, we've proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that martial arts is our fallback.
Right. Yes. It certainly gives you a framework, a reference of how you should live your life.
Absolutely. That's Confucianism did, right?
Yes.
It was a blueprint for the moral fabric of life. That's basically what it was.
Yes.
The enlightened man, because it was always man back then.
Right.
the enlightened man.
Before we run out of time, which we do so often, a couple mentions. I want to once again say, if you don't get Liyan, you really should, at least once, so you know what's in this magazine, because I think you will then make sure you subscribe to it. The second thing is we are looking forward to training here in the Dojang again, and I heard in the last class you were talking, when we open up, we may be able to have, what would you describe it being? How would you?
Well, I paced the whole Dojang out, and keeping with the 6-foot social distancing, we can have 12, maybe a few more, but 12 students in here safely. You know.
Good.
My suggestion to everybody would be, I don't know how you feel about this, but I would suggest strongly bringing masks and probably wearing them, because I will, just out of courtesy to everybody. You'll be able to hear me, you'll be able to train. It doesn't really restrict that much.
Right.
I can promise you that the first month or so, maybe 2 months, we're not going to have classes that are going to be so over the top that you're going to be passing out. We need to ease back into our training in the Dojang. Even though you've been training online, thank you, by the way, you'll need to ease back in our environment again. So you should be able to train easily with a mask on. Patty and I are looking at every contingency for safety. We're looking at, of course, plenty of hand sanitizer, disinfectants. We're looking at room purifiers, air purifiers. We're thinking of everything. We're trying to think of everything. So even so far as to wearing Taekwondo shoes in the school, if you'd like to. All right. Now that's going to be something you're going to have to either get through the school, because they're special shoes.
Right.
I think they're about $40, something like that. If everybody wanted to get a pair, in other words, if I had 30, 40 orders for them, I'm sure I can get a decent price on them. So if you're interested in wearing shoes in the Dojang, but please keep in mind that they would only be worn on the floor. Once you leave the floor, you'd have to take them off. So that's an option as well.
So,
you know?
so these are the Pumse slippers we're
Yeah,
discussing.
Pumse shoes, the type you see me with all the time. I only wear them. I have. Right. Patty says that our house looks like the home of a caterpillar, because I have about 12, 13 different pairs that I wear for work, in the yard, I wear in the house, I wear at the Dojang, I wear coming here and back and forth. So yeah.
I love my Pumses.
Yeah, they're really comfortable.
Yeah, very comfortable. Which reminds me, I wore mine this afternoon because we had the pleasure of working together with Master Danielle Roche, Mark McNutt, Ginny, and myself, with masks on in my driveway. Mm-hmm. And it was really good to be back with people, in a distance, but
yeah.
being able to do what we do, what we've done for so long. If any of you have a Taekwondo friend that you feel comfortable and safe with, you may wish to do the same. And learning how to work out while wearing a mask is not a bad thing.
Right, good point. Yeah, on Tuesdays I host a couple of students, it's about 4 students who come in, and we've advanced students, and we've been working on our forms. And when I walk out, I feel so enriched just by having interface with 4 students,
right.
You know. Also, Friday night I have 2 students coming in who ask if they can come in and work on their forms. So it's not unheard of, if you're interested, to come in to the Dojang, you know, on a limited level, 2 or 3 people at a time, to work on something with me. You know, it's not a full hour class generally, but it does work out that way sometimes. They're not, I don't even call them classes, they're informal gatherings, you know. And we've been doing this for a few weeks now with success. So if that's something that interests you, frankly, I'll do anything that my students need right now to progress, or just to remain sane, you know. And really all you need to do is no additional charge. All you need to do is let me know, you know, contact me.
I have given quite a bit of thought to what we discussed last week about how do we continue online classes, kamsamara, how we continue online classes, how we have in Dojang classes, and how do you fit that schedule together?
Yeah. We are pulling out our hair, what little hair I have left right now, trying to coalesce a summer schedule. And I've been in touch with some of the senior teachers to get their suggestions. I've sent out an email to all the parents asking how they would like to see the children's classes progress, frequency-wise, as far as how many a week, what times of the day, since the kids are home now, you know. So far, I've got back really valuable feedback, really a lot of information. Good. So we're looking at how we're going to implement the schedule. In other words, what's the duration of the classes? Are they going to be 45 minutes? Are they going to be an hour? Are they going to be built on color belt, black belt, or white belt to blue belt to bodan, first, second dan, third, fourth, fifth dan, you know, things like that. And we're rebranding our schedule. It's going to be very different, at least for now, from our typical schedule that we've had in place. Yes, there'll be, Master Testa was very much supportive of a bodan black belt class. That was one of her favorites, of course. And Master Testa, of course, obviously has a lot of sway in how we do things here at the school, being the head instructor. So it's in the process. That's all I can tell you. And if you have any desires, strong desires, to see something of a class or a time slot, please let me know, because you know, while the schedule will not be written in stone per se, it'll be mainly for July, and then we'll see what August brings. We will have in-school classes, in Dojang classes, but live streaming will be going on simultaneously while that class is going on. Plus, we'll also have a couple of exclusive live stream classes during the week as well. So it's going to be a very flexible schedule.
Right. That's really, I think it's exciting. And I think if any of you have an idea of a special class, off the top of my head, I'll give you one. Slow pumse. To really learn how each motion and each chamber flows together. And it just makes such a beautiful...
It's almost like Tai Chi.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah. I mean, almost every martial art has that built in somewhere, I would say.
You know what Master Adams and I are drinking? Vodka? No, not vodka. This is called Bori Cha. Bori Cha. I don't know if you know that, but it's one of my favorite teas. It's Korean barley tea. It's delicious. I've got a few boxes from Mrs. Chun. She gave us some. And I believe Sue Bell also gave me some, if I'm not mistaken. And it's really delicious. If you want to try it, let us know, and we'll get you some.
That reminds me that we're drinking this tea in what I believe is celadon.
Celadon, right.
Which is a very special craft from Korea. Very old, as I understand.
12th century.
12th century. What makes celadon so unique?
So first of all, celadon is pottery, right? And we've seen it made in Korea. We've seen the potters make it. Two things make celadon unique. One is the inlay pattern that the cups we have don't really have it. And also the glaze that's used is manganese oxide and another compound that makes it very beautiful, you know. Celadon basically means green glaze. That's kind of what it means. And it originated in China, as many things did, and was brought to the Koryo dynasty. And as you know, Koryo dynasty was from 918 to 1392. And many wonderful things happened during the Koryo dynasty. Not the least bit the creation of celadon, you know, in Korea. Celadon is one of the most beautiful pieces of pottery in the world, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art that's dedicated to celadon. And the more intricate pieces actually have swans and different kind of animals and designs, and they would be engraved into the clay itself, and then inlaid with gold and silver and other types of elements, and then the green glaze would go over it, which really makes it a beautiful piece of pottery. But also, some pieces are very rare, and they're very, very expensive if you get the authentic, genuine articles, But there's different colors, too. It's not just the green glaze. There's blue glaze, and there's a white glaze. And again, if you go to Korea, you can get Koryo celadon to this day, You can get it very inexpensively, like we have it here, or you can get it like more intricate museum quality pieces.
Yeah. They're very attractive cups. I have a set at home also. So very. Another question that I have for you is, what is the most adventurous or exciting story regarding Taekwondo that you have experienced?
Eating moving things.
Yes.
That's just one. I mean, I can think of a bunch of things, especially with Grandmaster Chun, but during our first trip to Korea, I call it my CIA trip because it was like a secret mission. The master who hosted it, Jung Choo Lee, didn't really tell anybody where we were going or what we were doing. There was no set itinerary. We basically stayed at his friends' houses, in apartments, like safe houses, But I was not even a black belt at the time, so I had to listen to my seniors. I had to follow their direction. So there would be times when they would just pass you a brown paper bag with grease on it or whatever and say, eat, And you'd stick your hand in there and you'd pull out a bunch of dead grasshoppers. Oh. And you'd pop them in your mouth and you start eating them. And they actually tasted great. They tasted like popcorn, really. But that was the easy stuff, But then there was one incident where we were out with about 4 or 5 grandmasters, and I guess they were checking how dedicated we are, So we were sitting in this fairly, as far as health goes, questionable restaurant rooftop. And they brought out a small bucket of things that were moving inside, filled to the top. And it turned out to be baby octopus. And they put this on a platter and with a sharp knife cut the legs off, just the legs, and threw them on a plate and stuck them right in front of us with some very hot sauce and said, eat. Meanwhile, they weren't eating theirs. They were watching us,
Wow.
Sure shooting. Grabbed them, stuffed them in our mouth, and they were crawling down our throat. We can literally feel them squirming down our throat. And on the table was this little green bottle that I could have sworn was 7-Up. Now you got to remember, this is the first time I've been to Korea, so I wasn't, and it was a long time ago, so it's not like it was today. So I grabbed this quote-unquote 7-Up and shot it down my throat in the hopes of washing this down. Turned out it was soju. And for those of you who don't know what soju is, it's sweet potato wine, right? But very potent.
It is. Yes,
and I got this about halfway down the bottle, the whole bottle. I went, wow! But it certainly did knock those moving things out of my throat. And then there were the larvae of the silkworms that we had to eat, too. So I don't know. That's just one adventurous thing about it.
Yep.
But these trips are pilgrimages.
Yes,
that's what they are. And pilgrimages contain an element of sacrifice, an element of discomfort. And you must have eyes, ears, and throat open when you're ready to do these type of things.
Yep. I remember on the first trip to Korea when one of our students bought this cup of moving larvae.
Yeah, right.
Silkworm larvae. And we all ate one, and it was an adventure.
Yeah, years later, I come to find out, though, that many of them put them in their mouth, but they didn't eat them.
Oh.
The second I turned around, they spit them out. So I found out about that years later.
Really?
As I do about a lot of things on these trips. I find out years later of things that happen.
So you're telling me I ate that worm.
I did, too.
And the back of the bus didn't?
Maybe not. See, good
Wow.
question, Master Adams.
Okay.
Good question to end with, right?
Great. Oh, always wonderful. Thank you so very much, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for watching and for tuning in. Send me your questions, please. And you know, I like the fact that we can discuss something that is so near and dear to our hearts, and to keep it alive during these times where we feel so distant from the things that used to bind us together. You know, and it certainly will feel great to have it again.
Yes, sir, in every aspect.
So, but I hope these are interest to you, and we'll keep going. Thank you so very much, everybody.
Thank you, Master Adams. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so very
Pleasure.
much. Good night.